Today's event is really the culmination of all the work that has been done across Sheffield Industrial Museums Trust around access, and it's to showcase that work really and to say that we're keen to learn more. So we want today to really be something that people can give comment on and feedback and give us pointers for the future.
So we've rolled two things into one really. We wanted to do something for Disabled Access Day, sort of a public events programme. So we've had storytelling and some of that's been BSL interpreted. We've had two tours on, so we've had a BSL tour and we've also had a touch tour, or a sensory tour really it turned into. And we've had lots of stands with different organisations talking about what they're doing and showing off their work as well. Part of the project funding was to do an annual conference, so we've got a talks programme going on. So the talks have ranged from the experience of blind and visually impaired people and how to guide people, right through to our chief exec talking with real vigour about our access project and all the other projects that we've been doing as well.
Coming back after sort of 2 years, I can see how things have moved along. I can see the work that we did, but I can see the benefits of the groundwork as well. The Inclusive Access Forum, for example, which we established at the start of the project, is now flourishing and has a great deal of respect and has a great deal of success in improving access for everybody.
It's just wonderful to visit again and see things being put in place. You know, just simple things like asking for a coat in a toilet the next time you come. It's there. So, you know, and the wheelchair paths across the site over the cobbles to make it easy for getting from one building to another.
The crux of it is that they have that approach of inclusion and working together and building on everyone's skills and ability and taking those ideas together, and the whole range of equality and diversity training and development that they do and working with people. I mean, it's just very simple process of let's ask what works best and take those ideas forwards, and obviously it's bearing fruit.
I selected a number of specific exhibits.
Today was an opportunity for people to come where everybody here would have an understanding that somebody else here had got a disability, and hopefully a welcoming, friendly environment.
In the past, museums have not been very accessible for a lot of visually impaired people.
It's shot from that side, from how it's blown it out that way.
Things are usually behind cases and lots of interpretation screens to read, and so making that information accessible, it's good.
I'm very pleased with the project because it's just making access part of the everyday work of the museums really, so that everybody is thinking about being able to touch things, being able to get to things, people being able to understand things, get the stories about them by some means. And I think this is a very good example of involving the users of the museum, the space, in actually shaping how the staff and the volunteers are going to address the issues.
You'll feel the weight of it, and then that's where they've tested it, and it's gone right through.
We've had a touch tour this morning involving touching some of the exhibits actually in the permanent exhibitions here, but also handling some objects that came out of the collection that isn't actually on display. One of the things that's been really nice to do was to get in between the two halves of the old boiler that's been chopped in half and have a look at that and actually handle the interior of the boiler. That's been it might sound a bit of a geeky thing, but I found that really very, very fascinating because I just hadn't appreciated how big it was and how complex it was.
I think the Access project and learning from the museum team's previous Access project as well has been really pivotal and core to how we think about how and what we want to do and the people that we need to get involved to make sure that the exhibition is inclusive for all the audiences that come to the museum. It's quite a difficult site. It's an exhibition which is on different layers and different floors and all over the place. It's quite challenging in terms of its access. So there are some key principles, there are some key ways in which we're making it as inclusive as possible, whether that's keeping to a graphic standard, using design principles that have been approved and accessibly for everybody. It's looking at positioning of objects and the different tools and layers that we use to make it accessible. So we are trying to integrate objects on display within graphic panels so they become part of the tactile experience. And again, when we've got big objects and we really need a case to look after them, making sure that the interpretation around it is also tactile, it's bite-sized, it's layered, to make sure that most people can get out of it the stories that we're trying to tell.
My job really is the new exhibitions that we've got as part of the 1916 project is to get the social history side of that into the museum and to really look at varying where we get that from and who we get that from. So I'm trying to work with as many different groups as possible. I'm focusing on working with people with dementia. I'm taking some objects out next week and to an acute care home for people with dementia to just try and record some of their memories of the things that we've got in the museum, and we like the idea of going to them so that the museum could go out to people rather than people having to come in.
I'm chair of the Sheffield Dementia Action Alliance, and the Alliance has now been going for 3 years. And what it's there for is to raise awareness and reduce stigma of dementia across the city. So opportunities that I have to deliver Dementia Friends sessions like I did here at Kelham is a really good opportunity. The Alliance is there to try and open up opportunities, open up access for people with dementia to do all sorts of things, not just come to the museum but go dancing and all sorts of other things that anybody would like to do. We did a Dementia Friends with the staff here, and that was really good, and they're really open to wanting to do some change around the cultural heritage of the city, of which this is one. So yeah, I love it here. So it's been really good for me today.
I came because I volunteer for SRSB Information Department, and there was a venue here for us today. But I also came because I hadn't seen the museum before, and I understood I'd be able to take part in a walk around the museum, especially to be able to feel things. And I understand you've done quite a bit of work on that. And I'd like to thank you for that because I found it very interesting. And it would be a good idea if other museums did the same thing. Some are trying, but I think this is the only one that has accomplished so much so far. A lot of thought has been put into it. And sometimes things have been altered because somebody has suggested something and they've changed what there is to be more accessible.
I came here today because I wanted to find out a bit about access in terms of museums, because I do lots of volunteer work in museums and archives, but I've never really understand anything about this part of accessing museums. So it's really interesting to find out about visual impairment and dementia and autism and all these different things. I think it's about like market research in a way. Like they've actually listened to what people have told them, and they've actually used the feedback to, work with their projects and make things better for visitors, but not just for normal visitors, for everybody. So it's brilliant.
I saw it advertised in, is it Science Weekly, and it sounded very interesting, because it was for all ages, even, my age, so, and I've only been here an hour, and I've genuinely thoroughly enjoyed it.
I looked on the internet and it mentioned it on Twitter, and it's actually mentioned that it's a national thing as a Disabled Access Day. And it's free entry, which is marvellous, even better.
Most of the places are flat, and they have got lifting. And they come, I think it's 2 lifts, I'm not sure. So you can go upstairs and work up to them. I've looked on here as well.
They supported you with a map, hadn't they? And she explained right at the beginning about the cafe.
Yeah.
And how to get to it just in case we need a rest. And toilets and things like that.
Quiet areas you've got as well where you can go down and rest as well. So that's a lot better.
My fiance's blind, Lee, he uses touch, so that's really good. And he went on the touch tours this morning, and he really enjoyed it. I'm learning to use speech sign language, so if anyone wanted to come, that they've had full paid interpreters here all day as well, so it'd be good for people to support in. If you sign, come, it's good.
Today's been pretty good. I've been on a guided tour and I've just been sat in the tour with about visual impairment, which I found pretty interesting as well. There is visually impaired people that like to get out and about, you know, so if it's accessible, it's all for the better.
This morning I went to get some cans of pop, and I struggled with my balance, and one of the members of staff carried them back for me to my stall. Just little things like that, just simple things. The support from the staff for the event's been brilliant.
And it was a gas-powered engine that powered a rolling mill at George Clark's on Penistone Road.
There's been a clear moving on process, you know, that it's very much the idea that it's not an event, but it's a process of improvement. And to see so many people here today, and as I say, see some of those additional better programmes and new programmes that are developed, that's wonderful, really.
It's been really interesting seeing the different people that have come along to listen to the lectures and come along and ask me questions about things that they're wanting to do. So if we can be a flagship for other people wanting to involve the public and get people into what they're doing, then I think that's a plus for Kelham Island as well. That shows us to be leaders in the area on including disabled people into what we're doing.
We are learning. We're not saying we're experts, and we're not saying that we are fully accessible to everybody. We want to be, but I'm sure there are things that we can do differently. So in terms of other organisations, I think people just need to give it a try and maybe take one thing at a time.
Yesterday I went and spoke in York because they asked me to talk about our project, and because we're now seen as sort of a really good example of good practice.
And we're also advising Sheffield Hallam in a project that they've got coming up. They've asked us specifically to advise around access.
To hold here as an example how places can and should work would be good.
When we go around presenting our work to the public, I would mention this fact to the customers that do come to us that have eye problems, that there is a very good museum and they can enjoy it by feel.
What we wanted the day to be was just really inclusive, and the idea that anybody can come. We've made it a free day on the weekend, so people could bring their families, see a couple of the talks and take part in the activities, and I think we've achieved that. So I'm really pleased with the way it's gone.
It's a landmark event, and it's very much, I think, a celebration for them as well, because they've moved on, they're doing new things. So it's almost like perhaps a crossroads, because they've got to this point now, and then they'll move on again. So with new ideas. So I think it's great, and certainly to showcase to the public, and particularly to disabled people, to encourage them to come to an event like that to see what can be achieved. Because unfortunately, as disabled people, sometimes we don't believe places will be accessible until somebody really tells us and shows us. But then when we find that's the case, then, we're then the best advocates.
I think it's a really good event, because to do with a few more people being here, and next time if you hear about it, come, it's good fun.